been following me lately, you know I've been trying to get my greenhouse to be heated so that it would overwinter crops and I could grow things in the wintertime. One of the main reasons, well, one of the reasons that I was trying to do that was tomatoes. I had an idea that if I could grow tomatoes year-round, that would be great. Now, I live in a cold climate, so it gets very cold. You know, it's not like the North Pole. I mean, I get 0 degrees and things like that, Fahrenheit, often here in the wintertime. But it's starting to warm up, and I'm really disappointed in what's happened to my tomatoes. And let me show you why. I guess to sum up what I'm seeing, these are indeterminate tomatoes. And I think indeterminate in this case doesn't necessarily mean, you know, they'll just keep growing taller. I think what it means is, I'm beginning to understand, it means that they don't know when it's going to die. And I've done some research, and it appears to me that even in areas where you get no frost, that indeterminate tomato plants probably last 2 or 3 years. But there is a time when they die, or they're just no longer productive. And let me show you this. Now, these tomatoes have never frozen in here. The coldest it has gotten is 36 degrees Fahrenheit on one evening. And it's gotten 39 several times, but most of the time it's only gotten down to 40. So there's been no frostbite here, but take a look at these. I've trimmed this vine up quite a bit, and if I run up and down here, you can see, you know, there's a lot of dead leaves, and I've also, and these need to trim them up more. But you can see here's a new vine, or a new shoot trying to grow. If we look over here, see there's still some nice tomatoes I've got to pick, and these vines look nice and green. And there's some new tomatoes I've got to pick there. But look down here at the bottom, there's a lot of dead leaves. Now, the thing is that I've noticed is these tomatoes here set, most of them, before the weather got really cold. These set after it got cold. But what I'm seeing is something that tells me that you just can't keep them going. As I was saying, what I had was an idea that if you get a good strong vine like that and you let it grow up, then keeping it trimmed year after year should be able to have quite a good crop of tomatoes on it that wouldn't necessarily be conducive to commercial production, but it might be you know, very intense production if you're willing to go in there and, you know, dig around and get them. Now let me show you what happens to these vines. Okay, over here is a good example of the problems that happen. As you can see, this is a sucker that looks like it's doing well. It's coming off of there. And over here, look at this. See, this seems to have split, and it's doing it here again. And I don't know why. Now, there was probably, well, look at that. It wasn't even connected anymore. That explains that. So never mind. I'll pull that one off. But even so, look at this. This is growing quite well, even though it's essentially broke here. So I'll have to pull that off, and we'll see if we can reroot that. But there are some other areas. Like, look at this one here. Here, whoa, look at that. See, here's one. Here's an example right here. This vine right here, as you can see, hasn't had any injuries. But as you go up the vine, you can see, well, there's a nice cluster of tomatoes there. But I think they're just ripening on their own, because if you you can see that there really isn't any life in this vine. See, it's not even green anymore. And as you go up the same vine here, you can see that there's nothing growing on it. It's dead, essentially. Now I see the obvious things here are, oh, let's see. Well, things like this. You see, there's the bottom vine right down there coming up. And it's kind of obvious that this vine here, it's not doing well. But then you see things like this. Here's a sucker, I guess it was at one time, but that's nice and green. That looks good. And there's another one right here, another sucker coming off. And there's another one. That's green. That looks good. And yet right here next to it, this one is looking pretty sad. So it's kind of a hit and miss with this. So I'm beginning to think at this point that, there's another one, that it's really not worthwhile to overwinter. Unless, of course, you know, some of these suckers, like there's one right there, and they start springing up like mad when the weather really warms up in here. It's just not worth it. You can see some of them are. There's one right there. There's another sucker. There's another one, and they're looking pretty healthy. Another one right there. And they're looking pretty good. But is this going to be worthwhile? I don't know. And if you look over here, see some of these out here on the end, they're looking quite healthy. And these tomatoes just set, I think, in the last month or so. And this one here is kind of illustrative of what's wrong here. Look at that, all the way up here. There aren't any leaves, except there are some sad-looking suckers trying to make a go of it. So, I guess the bottom line here is I would bet that it's not worthwhile to try and overwinter a vine, kind of like you might a grapevine, hoping that the next year it would do really well, because I don't think it would. I think it's better just to set out new plants. Now, in contrast to those are some over here. Now, these I planted kind of in the late fall, and they never got that big, but as you can see, they appear to be doing a lot better. They're climbing the strings, and I think I put this string right here about November, and that's to mark how tall it was. And as you can see, it's gotten a lot taller than that. Now, that's all wintertime growth. And this plant looks like it's doing quite well. And these are new tomatoes that have just blossomed out here a little while ago. So is that one, and there's another one. Those are recent. And see, there's some new blossoms coming out too. So it's not the overwintering so much as it maybe is that it was just time for these. They're done. Because these seem to be growing much better. They could look better than they do, but anyway, they're still growing, and they're still setting tomatoes out. So that's kind of interesting.